Hello there, and welcome to Weird Music on the Glumberg channel. This is of course the show where we take a different album every single week and, just have a little dive into it, And so today, I think I have a bit of a strange one lined up, but it's one that I've really been enjoying ever since I discovered it earlier this year, actually. It is an album that seems to take aspects from many different genres, from rock to drone to freeform, and it packages it all into this incredibly cohesive album experience. You do get, rather lengthy runtimes to the tracks, and sometimes it's a little confusing knowing where things are going to be leading, but with a little patience, we'll arrive exactly where we need to be. So without further ado, I present The Dead Sea with a look at their 2010 album, Patience. And so, let's of course ask ourselves, who are the Dead Sea? Well, the Dead Sea are an experimental music and art trio from New Zealand made up of members Bruce Russell, who plays electric guitar, Michael Morley, who plays electric guitar and laptop and also provided the album's artwork, and Robbie Yeats, who plays drums. And having been described by the one and only Thurston Moore as one of the most interesting bands in the world, the Dead Sea have pushed out this incredible discography of experimental noise rock, free rock, drone music, improvisation, and garage punk, essentially. So much of the music the Dead Sea offer, it's kind of like this chaotic, chunky sounding rock music, with the vast majority of it all typically being improvised and not recorded in standard professional studios, apparently. And so today, we're looking at the 2010 album Patience, released through Bardabing Records, who also released the reissue of the phenomenal Daughter of Darkness, which we did cover in an incredibly long episode. Patience, though, this is an album made up of 4 tracks: Empire, Federation, Shaft, and South. And weirdly enough, the names of these tracks kind of remind me of some kind of Isaac Asimov narrative. It's certainly what comes to mind when I hear this record. And to be fair, despite being a somewhat varied album where each track offers something a little bit different to each other, the whole thing is this incredibly cohesive album experience that just revels in the freeform expression of just jamming out and improvising music. And to be fair, the Dead Sea have a fantastic way of making it all look and sound so incredibly easy, with it being some weirdly rewarding music as a result. It's so bizarre. So let's just discuss the album then, shall we? So, Patience opens up with its longest track, the 16-minute long Empire. And so immediately, this album is demanding your patience as we set off on Odyssey through space and time. All one can do is just sit back and let the music take effect as we're just thrown headfirst into deep depths of guitar oscillations and feedback, pushed along so brilliantly by the drums that consistently keep up that tempo in the background as guitars just howl away in terrific fashion. There's just something so brilliantly satisfying about hearing the twin layers of guitars playing separate abstract drones and noises, and yet they somehow tie into each other so perfectly. You get one guitar that's just whining almost discordantly, just travelling along such strangled notes essentially, whilst the other just brings the dirge, I would say, playing these incredibly fuzzy riff ladens with overdrive essentially. And there's something so freeform and abstract about the entire composition, which it just lets all the musicians freely explore whatever musical direction their instrument is taking them in essentially. And yet it all, weirdly enough, comes together so cohesively, so perfectly that you wonder if this is even improvised music at all, right? It's so interesting. It's also expansive and yet so refined and controlled, so incredibly well organised, if that makes sense, you know? And even when the compositions go into these sort of more down-tempo sections where the instruments are just sort of doing their own thing, you know, just really exploring stuff, it still feels incredibly well planned though, even though it may well have not have been, to be fair. To put it simply, it's just a really exciting record to listen to, even with those lengthy runtimes of course. But its length is perhaps a very part of the very concept of the album itself, representing patience through the form of abstract improvised music. One might be waiting for the composition to go somewhere, but instead one should just sit back and let the composition unfold for exactly what it is, and have patience that it will arrive at its destination eventually. And so moving on, we move on to an incredibly quick little 1.5 minute excursion of Federation, which just slowly simmers along with these delay-ridden guitar layers. And you got the drums just tapping away on the cymbals, essentially, just keeping the momentum going. It's a short little number, but it's perhaps, you know, a little bit of respite after the long and arguably arduous journey of the album's opener. I would say if Empire was travelling through the vast voyages of space, launching off into the universe to your destinations thousands of light years away, then Federation is like going through the airlock into the next location. In my opinion, anyway. It's a short one, but I do like the musical layers on this one, and it's a lovely... But after something so long, following it with something so short is very interesting, and it kind of helps, you know, lead us towards the rest of the album, if that makes sense. And so immediately following on from this, we get the 5-minute long Shaft, which is a bit of a favourite of mine off this album for some reason. You're getting the tempo established by the drums, the squealing and whining feedback of the guitars, and the chunkier guitar in overdrive does these lovely slides of chunky chords, I would say. I would assume it's chords, it certainly sounds like it, but all in all, it's just giving this composition a wonderful driving momentum, I feel. And I don't know why, but I love the overdrive effect on the guitar though, as it just churns and chugs like some massive piece of machinery, just driving everything further down into the depths of the planet itself. And especially with the name of this one. This one makes it feel like we're literally in a massive shaft heading straight down into the mines in preparation to extract rare minerals from deep within the core itself. A weird thought, but I think it's interesting sometimes how your mind wanders when you listen to weird music like this and comes up with its own story, so it's going to be a bit more of this eventually. I just find it interesting, like listening to Patience as a whole album, it just gives me the sense of interstellar space travel essentially, and I think it's really cool. I don't know why, but that's just the sense I get from it. let's talk about the final track though. We move on to the final track of South, which for me it feels like the incredibly long journey home after excavating an entire planet of its resources. And so after the sort of chuggy overdrive of Empire and Shout, with Federation sitting between the two, you get an incredibly long atmospheric opener for South, which feels so much more drony and abstract than its predecessors. And so immediately what you're getting is this kind of buzzing effect as you get these gentle gliding chords from one of the guitars, whilst the other just creates this incredibly odd and peculiar soundscape. I assume it's the guitar, to be fair. It might actually be the laptop, but we'll see. In any case, though, the more this track goes along, the more peculiar the soundscape becomes, with the second guitar and or laptop just squealing with this whining feedback and just generally chugging away with these little motifs, you know? It's weird, but there's such... it's so weird, but I just delight in the sounds being achieved from this instrument, you know? Whatever is happening here. I don't know if it's the guitar, I don't know if it's the laptop, but it's just... I just love how it sounds, though, just sort of squeaking and droning and whining away, essentially. It's odd, because it feels like this track is kind of like it's trying to get itself going, if that makes sense. But it's simply struggling to gain the momentum needed to get up and move around. And sometimes you'll have the drums sort of like build up and sort of start to drive it forward a bit, and you wonder if the track is going to start accelerating forward into the distance. But instead, it just hangs back then, and it falls back into the recesses of feedback and noise. And this is perhaps where I feel our patience is being demanded the most from us. You know, as listeners, of course, it's as though after an incredibly long day, there's a lengthy process to get this ship up and running again. But with a bit of determination and patience, we can figure out the problem and gain the momentum needed to start, you know, going home, essentially. But to go back to it, I think it's a brilliant composition. It's one that really showcases so many disparate sounds being achieved from the guitar and or laptops, you know, going from whines and screeches to fuzzy dirges, essentially, and generally just making such a racket as the band, you know, tries their best to keep the momentum going. I find it interesting, to be fair, that this is what we've essentially been patiently building up towards. You know, you get monolithic, dirgy improvisations that lead up to this really abstract and expansive sounding track that reaches far and wide. And it's such a weird journey up to this point, but I find it so satisfying though, especially when you get to the final chords of the guitar to just finish off the entire album. Something so brilliant about it, making the whole journey just worth it, in my opinion. And so essentially with that, we've covered Patience by the Dead Sea. And yet, it's weird, this is an album I really wanted to cover for some time when I first heard it through browsing around Bada Bing Records. And I remember the first time I heard this one as well, so Glumberger's story time. So I remember I was getting a train back from London following a band practice. You know, it was going to be one of the late trains, essentially. I got to the station early so I would get home at a more reasonable hour, etc., etc. Everything was fine, but I ended up, the train ended up stopping at a platform, and I ended up having to wait there for over an hour for the next one. And it was really weird during this time. It was really cold on the platform. I was stressed and frustrated and annoyed, you know. And so, in the dead of the night, I decided to listen to Patience by the Dead Sea. And weirdly enough, at a time when I needed as much patience as I could muster, I randomly decided to stick this album on. And for some reason or other, it really stuck with me as a result, you know. The whole album actually gives off this really weird meditative vibe that ends up, you know, ensuing more and more the more and more it plays on, you know, especially if you just get yourself lost within the whole thing. And it's exactly what I needed for when the stress was just rising and rising insurmountably, you know. I needed to mentally check out for an hour, and so having an album like this was exactly what I needed, and it was just pure happenstance that I decided to listen to it then. But I'm so glad I did though, because it's become a favourite of mine within the sort of weird instrumental post-rock improv genre of whateverness that you describe the album as. It's essentially, 3 musicians jamming away and having an amazing time doing so. And the results of which is something that we can all enjoy, If it's your kind of thing, of course, it certainly is mine, to be fair. And so with that, I think we're coming to the end of today's episode of Weird Music. I'm glad to have talked about this one on the channel. Like everything, I'm just glad to have talked about the channel, but this one took me on a really weird, wonderful, enigmatic journey when I first discovered it. And I've loved it ever since, to be honest, And I'll say, to be honest with you, the viewers at home, with the sort of ADHD thing going on, there's a lot of albums I've come across, have wanted to discuss and have completely forgotten to do so. But The Dead Sea was one of those, but I randomly decided to return to it and see if I could come up with some thoughts about it, and we've got this very episode for you today. We got there eventually, and I'm glad we've done so, because I really adore this record and think many of you would enjoy it as well, to be fair, It's got fun angular edges, and yet it's such a free-flowing abstract album experience within its own right. A truly brilliant album from The Dead Sea. And so with that, I think we're just going to come to the end of today's episode of Weird Music. I wish you all the best. Take care, and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.